You had a wife that took care of the household. Husband was out there working. Husband's not happy in the marriage anymore, decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to sell this property. I'm going to take this money, move on with my life. This is not a title insurance policy. This is a commitment, provided everything in here is taken care of. So let me explain.
Welcome back, Novello Nation, to another episode of the Aaron Novello podcast. We have a real estate attorney with us today, Mr. Bryan Docobo. And I brought him to the platform for a very specific reason, because I always like to, ask people to participate that I feel can add a lot of value. So first and foremost, Bryan, thank you kindly for taking the time to be with us here today.
And thank you for having me, Aaron. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I love the Tumblr in the background, rocking the Aaron Novello podcast right there. Let's go. So, we were talking off camera before we got started, and I find it really interesting, having been in real estate for an extended period of time and facilitated, thousands of transactions, how very few, not only agents, but also consumers really understand what title insurance actually is. So if you'd be kind enough to perhaps educate us on what it is and why it's important.
Perfect. Well, I will, but I do want to start off by saying again, thank you, Aaron, for having me to the platform. I think it's wonderful what you've been doing and what you've specifically been doing with EXP. And if anybody agent out there has an opportunity to learn about EXP and understand their model, it is fantastic, and it's something you should call Aaron about and have that conversation with him. It's also important to, when you're with EXP or any other related model, to check who's in your upline. Who's providing value, who's the one that are doing the podcast, who's the ones that is educating the downline agents with that particular model. And that's something Aaron's doing. That's why I love him. That's why I'm here. Okay. So thank you for that. Yes, my name is Bryan Docobo. We are an attorney-based title company. We perform closings throughout the state, and we are located in the Tri-County area with a focus on South Florida, but we have a ton of clients out of Central Florida and all throughout the state. Great question as far as what is title insurance, and we're going to get to that in just one moment. It's important to understand that attorney-based title companies are a little bit different than just title companies. The services we can provide are much grander. It's much vaster. A lot of agents out there. Sometimes your broker might be busy because they're helping other agents in their team. I'm a resource to you. You could call me and say, hey, Bryan, we have certain language we want to draft. That I just want to make sure that it's crisp and it comes across legally accurate. I'm here for that. Matter of fact, the highest and best use of my time is working with agents and making sure the team of agents that we're with is as strong as possible. And you're out there making money. You make money for us, and it's when you give, you shall return. So we're able to do that. Also, another thing that our office is able to provide in a lot of deals. And agents, tell me if I'm wrong, but let's say you have every 5 to 10 transactions. And let's say maybe out of those 5 to 10 transactions, you have to deal with a difficult personality type, to kind of put it lightly. One thing that we do in our office is we have a buyer and seller both sign a non-representation agreement at closing. And the reason that we do that is because it enables us to be in a position of a neutral arbitrator or mediator when the time calls for it. So those deals that are kind of going off the rail and said, hey, we need to interject something here to kind of get it all settled and get it over the finish line. Title insurance, us in our office, we wear several hats. We wear 3 hats, in fact. One is, we'll start here, escrow agent. The next hat is title agent, and the third is settlement agent. All right. So we have, as our escrow agent hat is when, in the beginning of a transaction, there's an escrow deposit to be submitted. So on the front page of that contract, it will have our information there. And us holding the funds and distributing at the end of the transaction, that's our escrow agent hat. The next hat I'm going to discuss is going to be the settlement agent hat. That's us preparing all the documents, bringing everybody to close, making sure everything is done particularly right. Everybody signs the warranty deed. We record in the public records. That's our closing hat. Okay. The third hat that we're discussing here and focusing on mainly today is our title hat. Title hat is we make sure, as title agent, that whatever interest that the seller believes that they have in the property, they do in fact have before conveying it to the buyer. So title is clean. All right. We also make sure there's no liens, encumbrances, anything that could attach to the property that could be the buyer's concern after closing. We strip that off. We take care of that. Once that is complete and once that is done, we issue a title insurance policy. Okay. So later on, if somebody comes knocking on the buyer's door saying, "Hey, you missed the marital interest. We are now roommates," you could laugh at them and tell them "Hey, you can hit the door. I got this title insurance policy and we're going to take care of this." Now, the nature of insurance is allocation of risk. You are paying a premium to someone for them to take on that risk. So buyers could sleep at night knowing that hey, if I have a problem, I'm insured. It's going to be taken care of. It's a one-time premium payment. It's not something that's paid each year like homeowners insurance. But that's the essence of title insurance.
I'm aware of some of these terms. I just want to make sure we get clarity around them, right? So
Sure.
you mentioned clean title, and you
Right.
mentioned things like liens or encumbrances. So can you kind of explain that as clearly as possible, what you mean by that?
Yes. So first off, when we're talking about clean title, we're kind of going to take these in twofold. All right. Let's talk about clean title. All right. And let's talk about a chain of title. All right. Going back to the beginning of time, somebody owns the property. They convey it to this next person. Maybe this person passes away. There has to be a probate process. Title vests in this entity. Maybe there was a tax deed auction. And maybe something had to be done at this point, and then invest in this person. Well, anyhow, as we go back and make sure all the links in title are clean, meaning that there's no break in that chain of title, meaning there's no outstanding interest. Let me just give you one example that could be the case. In Florida, we recognize a marital interest, and let me kind of go forward on this. Once upon a time, when there was more traditional marital roles, you had a wife that took care of the household. Husband was out there working. Husband's not happy in the marriage anymore, decides, hey, you know what? I'm going to sell this property. I'm going to take this money, move on with my life. Well, that would leave a lot of women and families in pretty tough situations because they'd be homeless and they didn't have any money out of that transaction. So Florida came in, just like other legislatures around the several states, said, no, we're going to recognize a marital interest whether the wife is on title or not. So later on, if that can't happen, the wife could either secure the homestead or she could be able to get some proceeds out of the transaction. Also, the next question, the liens, encumbrances, mortgages. So for instance, nowadays, well, historically, people need mortgages, for instance, to be able to borrow money to purchase homes. Well, that's an encumbrance on title. That's a mortgage that needs to be cleared off before the buyer takes title. Otherwise, that will be their responsibility. There's other types of liens. Let's say, for instance, the city comes out to your property and sees that it's not being kept up, or maybe there's a homeowners association where there's a delinquent payment. They could go and they could file a lien against the property, and that's something that if there's a quitclaim deed done where there's no warranty deed, then that would be the buyer's responsibility. It's our job to clear these off in order for us to have a closing and us to issue title insurance.
So, in other words, there's a chain. People have owned this property since it was built, or since whenever it came into existence.
Yes.
And what needs to happen is, prior to the property transferring from one individual to the next, we need to make sure that there are no
breaks in that chain,
like breaks in the chain, and there's no encumbrances or liens. So that way, we're transferring a clear or clean title to the new owner. And you mentioned a few things that could show up. City liens, I've seen that. Homeowner associations. I've also seen mechanic liens, where if you had a vendor and you guys get into a disagreement about payment and you didn't pay them and you thought it went away, and then you put your home on the market and you go to sell it, and then prior to closing, your office calls them up. It's like, hey man, Bob Smith put a mechanic lien on the property like 10 years ago, and we have to clear this up in order to sell. Correct?
Because each one of those potential issues is going to be kind of dug up and taken care of. So, for instance, you're discussing actual liens recorded against the property. That's going to be done through our title search. Okay. What we do, matter of fact, what I did here is I printed out what's a title commitment. This is not a title insurance policy. This is a commitment. This is saying we are committed to issuing you a title insurance policy, provided everything in here is taken care of. So let me explain. This first page is called a Schedule A. This has the general information, who the insured is going to be, what are the amounts, premium amounts as far as the lender's title insurance policy or owner's title insurance policy, depending on the transaction, might be finance, might be cash. All right, and holds also states here who actually holds title and what by instrument. So this is an important page. But more importantly, whenever you get a title commitment back, and this is speaking directly to the agents, because with the client, this is one thing I learned. Let me take a step back. As an attorney, I've had an opportunity to be in several different areas of the law, and you know what I learned? People want to just familiarize themselves and understand where they are at in a process that they're not familiar with. That's all people want. The most important aspect to this title commitment is the B1 requirements, okay? These are requirements that are needed to be cleared off of title in order for us to be able to issue a title insurance policy. So Aaron was discussing, okay, what if we see a lien or an HOA lien? It's going to pop up here. It's going to be a recorded document in the public records against the property. Another thing, we discussed mechanic liens, right? I'm happy you brought that up because this happens a lot. And this is something where even some buyers get ahead of themselves. What predates that mechanics lien is a notice of commencement. Okay, what a notice of commencement is when you go and you say, "Hey, I want to put new windows on this property, or I'm going to put a new roof on." Right? You're going to go through a licensing process with the city. Through that process, what you're also going to execute is called a notice of commencement. That is something that's recorded in the public records, and what that does is it tells the world that this particular contractor is doing work at this property, providing these services. Okay, at this moment in time. Okay, just to tie a bow on this title commitment, because this is one of the various documents you will receive. Just another thing to make a mention of is there's a Schedule B2. These are exceptions to the title insurance policy, okay, saying, hey, you can't bring a claim on these. We're not going to cover it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for those kind of that are listening, like if you are imagining that when somebody says they're going to put a lien on your property, that you're never going to have to deal with it. Nope. Eventually, if you go to sell the property, you're going to have to deal with it. Same with the city. I've seen that happen multiple times, and you got to get them cleared up. Now, two questions I have. The first one is with this. It's interesting because I've been doing this a long time, and you said like a quitclaim deed, which I'm very clear on what that is, and a warranty deed, and it struck me like, oh yeah, those are different. So a quitclaim, to my understanding, would be is I'm just transferring interest without doing all of the background stuff that we're talking about. A warranty deed is where you've done all of the homework and I'm warranting like, yes, this is clear and I'm transferring from one person to the next. Is that right?
But you're absolutely right. Okay.
Now, I have been noticing that title companies, they've been reaching out to me in an attempt to try to, earn business or drum up business and saying that they'll do like a title search when we list the property. And I always find myself like, why? Like, why is that valuable? Like, I don't understand like why that would be of interest. So I'm curious to get your feedback on that or that like particular strategy, because I'm sure other agents, if they're watching like or listening, they've heard that.
I don't really know if that juice is worth the squeeze. Obviously, it's a way of locking down an agent and locking down people early on to ensure that they get the title and get the business. The substantive value, questionable, because the thing is that this is all stuff that's going to be taken care of in the transaction. Also, that's kind of it might be time not well spent. Ultimately, if the seller decides to go in another direction, maybe decides to delist the property. Ultimately, what we personally do in our office, the moment we get that contract, it immediately goes to my processing department. They open up the file. You're going to receive emails. Boom. Our orders go in. We order the lien search. We order the title search. We order the estoppels. Everything goes in all at once. The turnaround time on the title commitment, we're talking like 3 to 5 days. Okay.
Oh, it's not long at all.
No, yeah. It's not long at all.
And then I'm wondering for both, like I understand for agents how, the title company, if you're suggesting them, like it's an extension of you and you want to make sure people are getting good service. And also, I guess my question to you would be from a consumer's perspective, whether it's a buyer or seller, like, because I feel like this is happening, having processed thousands of transactions, this happens underneath and nobody really like pays attention to it. So like from your perspective, why is it important to be intentional and purposeful about who you end up choosing for that or working with, if you have the capacity to make that decision? Because as you mentioned, in certain counties, what's customary is that a certain person picks and pays.
So let's take that from a seller's perspective. It's seller's obligation under the standard as is contract that everybody uses to pass good and clean title. They have a certain time frames to get that done. Ultimately, if a title company misses something and it jeopardizes the transaction at the very end, well, guess what? It's the seller that's in breach. The seller now is in a position that they cannot pass clean title. If you have a buyer, for instance, that maybe have soured on the deal and is trying to wiggle out of the transaction, you've now afforded them an opportunity. And the seller might be in a position, say, now I got to go and relist. Maybe they're using the proceeds from that sale to purchase another property, could jeopardize that transaction, that escrow deposit. That's why it's important to make sure you pick the right title company, a company that that is going to be able to handle any type of situation thrown their way. And that's where we kind of value ourselves. I'm in the business of getting deals done. I'm not in the business of getting deals to fall apart. And we're fortunate to be attorneys to interject ourselves in the way we do to make sure we get everything over the finish line and have the very fine way of looking at the title to make sure there's no issues. Now, another thing that was touched upon here is how do you personally secure your position in a transaction. Okay, you'll see a lot of times that there's seller representation or buyer representation. This occurs where maybe that party wasn't in a position to pick title, but they say, you know what, I'd feel more comfortable if I had an attorney representing my interest in the transaction, not just somebody that's neutral. That is an option. That is absolutely an option. For a seller, for instance, you're able to, at the conclusion of a closing, what I do for my clients, I make sure they don't sign anything they don't have to. All right, to put them in a position to protect their interest. Likewise, if I'm representing a buyer, I make sure that I see everything the title insurance company has done. I make sure to look at every single document they prepared on the seller side. If it's a probate, for instance, and there's certain probate documents that maybe don't look quite right because they missed something to record in the public records, I'll bring it to their attention. Why? Because later on when the buyer goes to sell the property, it's not going to be their issue. Everybody wants something smooth, not just with the current closing, but they want everything to be smooth in the future. And that's ultimately, if you're you want to make sure that there's a professional looking at that, and you did not have an opportunity to select title, call me. We provide those services too.
What came up for me as you were saying that is that Florida is a title state, right? Not an attorney state, correct?
We are correct. There's other states that recognize the importance of having attorneys involved in every transaction, know what's ifs or buts about it. Okay, there's many states that do that. Florida's not one of them. There's other title companies where anybody for that matter, could just go and try to get their title insurance license. They could open a company, and yeah, just like anything else, there's good title companies, there's not so good title companies, there's good attorneys, there's not so good attorneys. So I just want to say that this isn't like a general whitewash saying, hey, all title companies are bad, all attorneys are great. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is that attorneys do have an ability to provide additional resources directly applicable to having a smooth closing. And that makes us different than some other title companies that don't have that.
Yeah, it actually is a differentiating factor. So it's like, just like with agents where, in general, I'm sure like the fees and stuff, everything may be like a little bit of room, but they're pretty much customary.
Correct.
And the main difference is not only the quality of kind of service and communication, but also the options that you can provide for people. And because you are attorney, like I have to put on everything. I'm not an attorney. Like I don't, and I have to tell people that prior to having a conversation. You don't have to have that,
right?
And you can provide guidance. You also can, if they choose to have you represent them on seller docs or on buyer's docs or things of that nature. So they actually do have representation versus with a title company that they and again, there's nothing wrong with them. They're good people doing a good service. They just don't have the capacity to do that. They can't do anything that would harm either party in the course of the transaction, but they don't have any kind of obligation to really focus on one side's best interest over the other.
Especially with a lot of agents. They're concerned about unauthorized practice of law. Could I say this? Could I not say this? And that's where definitely I see a vacuum of space where we hop in there and provide those services. I was able to assist agents every day, one of your agents as well, and I was able to hop in there and kind of let them know the map because it was an unfamiliar territory, and kind of move things along in the right direction. Also, what I do a lot of times is, hey, are you not, I position the agents to get them in a place where they can have that conversation with their client. But a lot of times I say, hey, if you're not comfortable having this conversation with the client, put me on the phone, and I'll make you look good too, because I am part of your team. I'm part of the resources that you have that you're bringing to your client. You know what? Your client's going to love it.
Yeah, I love that. And people could even on their marketing, I just popped into my head because, we have a consulting company where we coach agents throughout the country, and they could even put on, their marketing material like, yep, like Bryan's part of the team. We have an attorney, real estate attorney. If you have any questions, like he'd be more than happy to answer them for you. Yep. And I can attest for those that are listening that that very much so is the case. We've reached out to you and you've been generous with your time and walking us through kind of some situations, and there's never like hey, are you going to give me some business back in return? Or, hey, that was like an hour, 30 minutes of my time. Like, I'm going to send you a bill in the mail. There's none of that. No. So, what you're saying is accurate. You're not just saying it, like you actually practice it, which I think is awesome. Thanks. So listen, brother, this has been a productive, enjoyable use of my time. I hope it has been for you as well. So if people are interested, if they have any questions, which you're very good at answering, or if they need help, or if they have a file that they want to send your way, what's their best method of finding you?
Yes, the best method to find us. You could email me. My name is Bryan, this is my email address, Bryan spelled Bryan, at Esquire Closings, and that's spelled ESQUIRE, and then closings with an S.com. You could also call me directly at 754-222-5111. And you could also check us out at esquireclosings.com. And you can order title through there if you need to. Usually it's better in the transaction to contact me direct, but if you want to go through the website, hey, I'm not going to say no.
Yeah, which is awesome. And you'd be doing yourself a favor to do that. So again, I appreciate you, brother, and I look forward to continuing to work together as a team, and look forward to talking to you soon.
I appreciate it, Aaron. Love you, brother.
Awesome, man.
All right, take care.
Yep,
Bye.
Be great. Talk to you soon.